I still remember the morning I stepped out to feed my cattle and found a gleaming Bentley sprawled across my barn doors like it had been delivered straight from a showroom to block my life on purpose. Chrome still smelled like fresh wax. Tires barely had dust on them. And there it sat, sealing off the only way I could get my tractor out. And, of course, it belonged to Karen, the self-crowned queen of our HOA. She lounged against that car in big sunglasses, lips curled in a little smirk that dared me to open my mouth. Karen has a gift for turning plain mornings into full-scale battles. But that day, she didn't just park a car. She planted a flag. And I wasn't about to let some luxury toy decide whether my farm ran or died. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. My name's Tom. I'm 52, and most of those years have been spent working this same patch of land. To anyone else, it might just look like dirt and timber. To me, it's bloodline. My father built that barn board by board. My grandfather taught me to mend fences and rotate crops before I was tall enough to see over the steering wheel of a truck. Around here, neighbors used to wave from tractors, not file complaints about unsightly barns or livestock noise violations. That was before the HOA moved in. They started showing up a few years back. Suburban families tempted by lower taxes and the idea that country living was quaint. They brought granite countertops, manicured lawns, and a binder full of rules. And leading the charge was Karen, the woman who believed a clipboard carried the same authority as a sheriff's badge. Karen didn't just sit on the HOA board. She lived for it. She printed out bylaws, highlighted them like scripture, and marched house to house preaching community standards. The first time she came to my place, she looked at my barn like it was a disease. "This structure is unsightly," she said, in the same tone you'd use for mold in your fridge. "It doesn't meet our community aesthetic standards." I laughed right in her face. That unsightly structure had been standing longer than any house on our cul-de-sac. It had seen storms, drought, and a tornado that ripped the roof off her precious clubhouse years before she ever showed up. Her idea of heritage was probably a designer purse from last season. From that day on, it was war. The complaints started small. My rooster crowed too early and interrupted her meditation. I told her the rooster didn't own a clock. Then it was hay bales stacked too close to the property line. Then manure smell. Then tractor noise. Then dust after harvest. One afternoon during hay season, she actually marched into my yard and demanded I tarp the bales because they were an eyesore from the road. "Want me to put curtains on my cows too?" I asked. She didn't crack a smile. Karen doesn't laugh unless there's a victim. And the HOA board? They bent to her every whim. Half of them were her friends. New arrivals who thought living next to a working farm was picturesque, until they discovered real farming comes with noise, mess, and smells you can't bottle into a candle. I tried to keep the peace. I patched fences, kept my dogs on my side, even stopped blasting Johnny Cash on Saturday mornings. Didn't matter. In Karen's mind, my barn, my tractors, my entire way of life, were a blemish on her perfect neighborhood brochure. Let me paint you a picture of this place. My land spreads wide, dotted with old oaks and maples. The barn sits right in the center like a heartbeat. Every day starts the same. Pull the tractor out, haul hay, feed the cattle, check the fences, keep things moving. That barn door is the artery. If it doesn't open, the whole operation clogs. And that's exactly what Karen wanted. I'd heard her comments at board meetings. Maybe Tom should consider selling. A modern development could really raise property values. She'd purr, smiling like she was doing me a favor. What she meant was, I want his farm flattened into another cookie-cutter subdivision called Whispering Pines or Golden Meadows. People like Karen see tradition as clutter. Progress is whatever bumps their home value. So when I walked out that morning and saw her Bentley stretched across my barn doors, I knew it wasn't bad parking. It was a test. A message. Her HOA rules versus my way of life. She stood there with an iced latte, looking like she was waiting on a runway instead of a farm. She knew exactly what she was doing. What she didn't understand was this. You don't just block a barn door. You block survival. I stared at that spotless silver car, sun glinting off its paint, and thought, this is it. This is where she crosses the line. My cattle didn't care about bylaws. They cared about hay. My tractor didn't care about community guidelines. Cared about getting out of that barn. And I wasn't about to bow to someone who thought leather seats and chrome wheels outranked 3 generations of hard work. Karen thought she had all the power, money, her friends on the board, and that fancy Bentley as her crown jewel. But she forgot one thing. On a farm, the strongest weapon isn't money. It's horsepower. And I was about to remind her. By the time I reached the barn that morning, Karen was already perched on the hood of her Bentley like it was a throne. Big hat, oversized sunglasses, smug little grin. None of it said, accident. Well, good morning, Farmer Tom, she called, voice dripping with fake sugar. Hope you don't mind. I needed a place to park my new baby while the landscapers finish my driveway. I looked from her to the car, still sporting dealer tags. Karen, I said slowly, this isn't a parking spot. This is my barn. I need my tractor out. Now. She tilted her head, pretending not to understand. Oh, I'm sure you can wait a few hours. Your, what do you call it, tractor? She laughed lightly, like farm work was a hobby you squeezed in between yoga and brunch. Can it take a little break? That laugh lit something in my chest. My tractor doesn't take breaks, Karen. My cattle need feeding. Hay needs moving. That's how this place runs. She waved her manicured hand, brushing off my words. Honestly, Tom, your whole setup is so outdated. Do you really expect the neighborhood to tolerate all this dirt and noise forever? Maybe this is a sign you should modernize. There it was. The knife behind the smile. This wasn't about convenience. It was about control. She wanted me stranded, humiliated, forced to watch my land sit idle because she decided so. Move the car, I said, my voice low and flat. She slid off the hood and sauntered closer. And if I don't? I stepped up, gravel crunching under my boots. We were eye to eye, her perfume sharp against the honest stink of hay and manure. Then you'll regret it. Her smile widened, but something flickered behind her lenses. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm promising you. She huffed and whipped out her phone. You know, Tom, I could report you right now. Intimidation, harassment, violation of HOA conduct policy. You're already on thin ice after last month's rooster incident. The incident was nothing more than my rooster doing what roosters have done since the beginning of time, crow at dawn. But Karen could turn sunrises into violations if it suited her. My blood pressure climbed, but I knew an outburst was exactly what she wanted. Her battlefield was paperwork, fines, complaint forms. On that field, the board would always side with her. Looking at that Bentley wedged across my barn, I realized I couldn't beat her with memos. I had to beat her with mud. Fine, I muttered, turning away. Enjoy your temporary parking spot. Her laugh screeched behind me like a rusty hinge. That's what I thought. But as I walked back toward the house, something clicked. She thought she'd won. Thought her money and friends and shiny toy had made me kneel. She didn't realize she'd just given me the perfect excuse to fight back. Grow up on a farm and you learn. Some problems need patience. Some need tools. And some need raw horsepower. That Bentley was big, loud, expensive, but it wasn't built for barns. It wasn't built for mud, hay, or steel. My tractor was. The more I turned it over in my mind, the louder my father's voice got. Son, when someone blocks your barn, you don't ask permission. You plow right through. Blocking that door wasn't a prank. It was sabotage. No tractor meant no hay runs. No hay meant hungry cattle. No tractor meant fields ignored. Things snowball fast on a farm. That car was choking my place at the throat. And she knew it. By noon, word had leaked down the street. A few neighbors lingered at the fence, whispering and sneaking glances. Karen's car. Tom's barn. He's furious. She always did love an audience. The queen bee in the middle, her hive buzzing on the sidelines. I tried to finish chores, fed the chickens, stacked some wood, but my eyes kept dragging back to that silver blockade in the sun. Every shift of her leather seat, every jingle of her bracelets, every smug little movement scraped at me. Mid-afternoon, I'd had enough. I walked back over, keeping my tone steady. Karen, this is your last chance. Move the car, and we can leave it behind us. She didn't even bother to stand. You're cute when you think you have authority, she said. I'll move it when I'm good and ready. In the meantime, maybe you should find a hobby that doesn't involve heavy machinery. That was the last straw. I didn't argue. I just turned and headed for the tractor shed. Sometimes the only answer left is engine noise. The shed wasn't far, and by the time I reached it, some of the fire in me had burned down to coals. My father's old warning floated up. Tom, anger's like a fire in dry hay. It'll burn hot, but it'll take the whole barn if you're not careful. For a moment I hesitated. Crushing that Bentley would feel good, sure, but it could drag me into a legal mess big enough to bury me. So I tried one last bit of diplomacy. I walked back to the barn, wiped sweat from my brow, pulled out my phone. Karen was still leaned against her car, scrolling, probably posting country life selfies with her new toy. Karen, I said evenly, I'm calling the sheriff. This isn't just inconvenient. It's obstruction. You're interfering with my work. She didn't look up. Go ahead. Sheriff's department knows me very well. My husband donates to their annual gala. That grin again. The one that made my molars itch. I called anyway. Deputy Miller, a young guy, answered. I laid out the situation. There was a pause and a careful cough. Well, Mr. Harris, he said. Technically this is private property and HOA stuff is usually civil. Unless she's trespassing or causing direct harm, there's not much we can do. I could hear the shrug. Miller's a decent kid, but nobody in uniform wants to dive into an HOA swamp. Too many gray areas, not enough payoff. Fine, I said, and hung up. Karen slid her glasses down her nose, eyes glittering. Told you, you're wasting your time. You really should read the community handbook. I clenched my fists, swallowed the urge to say what I really thought. All right, then I'll take it to the HOA board. That night I did. The meeting was in the community clubhouse, air conditioning humming, rows of bottled sparkling water lined up like soldiers. The board sat in a neat row with clipboards, acting more like a jury than neighbors. Karen sat dead center, presiding like a judge in a sundress. I laid out the facts. Her car blocked my barn door nearly all day. I couldn't get my tractor out. My barn is functional, not decorative. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about work. Livelihood. Karen cut in before I finished. Tom, you're exaggerating. I parked temporarily while waiting for contractors. Surely your farm animals could wait a few hours for their hay. It's not like they were starving. A couple board members chuckled politely. This isn't funny, I said, jaw tight. She's interfering with agricultural operations. If this keeps up, my livelihood is on the line. Douglas, one of the board members, tapped his pen. Tom, we understand your frustration, but technically, community rules allow for visitor parking in shared spaces. Shared spaces? I snapped. That's my barn. My land. What part of that is shared? Douglas shifted in his chair. We'll need to review the property boundaries. In the meantime, perhaps you could be more accommodating. Karen's guests bring value to the community. Value? I almost laughed. Her Bentley blocking my barn door is value? Karen leaned back, satisfied. See, Tom, this is why you're always in conflict. You don't adapt. You cling to your old ways. Progress requires compromise. Progress, I said, is not parking a luxury car where livestock get fed. That's not progress. That's arrogance. But the board had already checked out. Papers shuffled. Eyes dropped. The meeting was adjourned with a vague, "We'll revisit the guidelines." I walked out to the sound of Karen's laughter echoing off the clubhouse walls. Driving home under the stars, that helpless weight pressed down. I tried reason. Tried the sheriff. Tried the board. Every door slammed shut. Next morning, I stepped onto my porch. The Bentley was still there. Same polished shine. Same smug silver blockade in the sun. My cattle bawled louder than usual, restless from the disrupted feeding routine. Their pacing at the fence hammered it home. This wasn't just my pride anymore. It was my responsibility. I walked up to Karen one last time, hands open. Karen, listen. I don't want this to get uglier. Just move your car. I'll help you find another spot until your driveway's done. We can be done with this. She lowered her glasses, that familiar smirk carving deeper. Tom, you just don't get it, do you? This is bigger than a car. Your barn is an eyesore. Your tractor is a nuisance. Frankly, your whole farm drags down property values. If you don't like where this community is headed, maybe you should sell and move somewhere less civilized. Those words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were true, they weren't, but because of the contempt baked into every syllable. To her, 3 generations of sweat were just clutter in the way of her dream neighborhood. Whatever patience I had left burned out clean. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I turned and walked toward the shed. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her laughter followed, high and sharp. That's right, Tom. Run along to your toys. You'll learn who's really in charge around here. She had no idea what kind of toy I was about to fire up. Diplomacy had failed. Time to speak the only language left. Horsepower. The shed door groaned open like the start of an old western. Sunlight cut across the green steel of my John Deere, dust drifting in the beam like it was waking up for a fight. I'd had that tractor for years. It had chewed through hardpan clay, dragged hay wagons stacked higher than the roof, and yanked out fence posts after storms. It wasn't just a machine. It was a partner. And now it was going to be my battering ram. I stood there a moment, hand resting on the warm metal hood. It still smelled like oil and earth from yesterday's work. In my head, my father's gravelly voice came back clear as ever. On a farm, problems get solved with steel, sweat, and horsepower. Don't forget that, son. I hadn't. I climbed up, settled into the worn seat, turned the key. The engine roared to life. A deep, rolling thunder that rippled across the fields. Chickens scattered. Cows turned to look. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. By the barn, Karen flinched. Her sunglasses dropped just enough to see her eyes squinting toward the shed. For the first time, her confidence slipped. I eased the tractor into the yard, the ground vibrating under its tires. Along the fence, more neighbors had gathered, phones already in hand. Word travels fast when there's a chance to watch a show. I parked the tractor in the open and killed the engine. Not yet. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I grabbed my toolbox, checked the hydraulic lines on the front loader, tightened the bolts. I wasn't about to damage my John Deere over Karen's vanity project. The tractor deserved better. Memories washed over me as I worked. Hauling logs with my dad after a storm, dragging a neighbor's truck out of a ditch, sitting on the hood at night drinking iced tea under the stars. That tractor had been there for all of it. Now it was about to settle the biggest argument this neighborhood had ever seen. By late afternoon, the air was thick with humidity and tension. Half a dozen neighbors leaned on the fence, whispering, not daring to leave. Karen marched toward me, hands on her hips. Tom, you are not seriously thinking about touching my Bentley, she shrieked. That's a $200,000 vehicle. You so much as scratch it and I'll have lawyers on you before sundown. I leaned against the tractor, calm. Then move it. Her jaw clenched. No, a murmur rippled through the crowd. She wasn't just refusing. She was daring me, betting I wouldn't do it. She didn't know how far she'd pushed me. I wiped my hands, climbed back into the cab, and turned the key. The John Deere thundered to life again. The yard went silent. Even the birds shut up. Karen's face drained beneath her makeup. She stumbled back, clutching her phone like a shield. Slowly, I lowered the front loader. The hydraulics hissed as the steel bucket tilted down, the edge catching the evening light like a blade. Tom, don't you dare! Karen screamed, her voice cracking. I didn't respond. Words were useless now. I eased forward. The tractor rolled with slow, unstoppable certainty. Every foot closer leached more color from Karen's face. The Bentley sat there, gleaming and smug. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was every fine, every insult, every chuckle at those board meetings where they wrote me off. I stopped a few feet from the bumper. The bucket hovered over the hood like a guillotine. I shut the engine off. Silence slammed down. I turned to the fence line. "You all see this?" I called. "This is what happens when people think rules matter more than land, work, and respect. She's blocked my barn all day. My cattle go hungry while she poses with her car. The board backs her up. I've had enough." A few neighbors nodded. One started to clap, then caught himself. I started the tractor again. The crowd jumped. Karen shrieked. I still didn't move. Not yet. Some moments deserve to be savored. Because this wasn't just revenge. It was justice written in steel and rubber. And tomorrow, everyone in this neighborhood would know. You don't block a barn door in my town and walk away clean. I pressed the clutch, eased forward. The world narrowed to the growl of the engine and the gleam of that hood in front of me. The bucket dropped the last inch and met metal with a sickening crunch that rattled through the tractor frame. The Bentley's hood folded like foil. The shiny emblem snapped clean off and bounced into the dirt. Gasps burst from the fence line. Half horror, half wild delight. Karen staggered backward, hands on her head. "My car. That's a Bentley. Do you have any idea what it's worth?" I pushed the lever. The bucket drove down harder. Hydraulics hissed. The windshield shattered in a spiderweb of glass, shards raining onto the ground. The alarm started screaming, a shrill, useless wail. Phones were raised high now, recording every second. This wasn't a spat anymore. It was a showdown, wealth versus grit, in high definition. I eased the tractor forward. One giant front tire climbed the side panel. The Bentley sagged under the weight, frame groaning as if it were alive and begging for mercy. The crowd hooped. Some laughed out loud. An old farmer down the road slapped his hat against his leg. "About time someone put that woman in her place," he hollered. Karen lurched forward, flailing her arms in front of the tractor. "You're insane, Tom. You'll go to jail." The tractor's shadow swallowed her. For a second she looked tiny, hands flapping against the roar. I caught her eye through the cab glass and held it. Said nothing. Then I drove on. The roof caved in with a thud like a tree cracking in a storm. Leather ripped. Airbags exploded in puffs of white that drifted out like surrender flags. I backed up a foot, rolled forward again, grinding the remains into twisted, smoking scrap. Burnt rubber and scorched paint fouled the air, sharp and metallic, mixing with the honest smell of hay from the barn. It was pure destruction, and it felt right. Finally, I backed off and killed the engine. The once pristine Bentley was now a crushed heap, rims bent, frame mangled, black oil bleeding into the dirt. Only the dying whine of the alarm broke the silence. It sputtered a few more beeps and then choked out. I climbed down from the cab, boots hitting the ground like a gavel. Karen's mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hat sat crooked. Her voice had gone ragged from screaming. For the first time, she didn't look like a queen. She looked like a kid who'd just lost a toy. "You should have moved it when I asked," I said. The crowd erupted. Laughter, applause, a few whistles. Every phone was still pointed our way. Karen lurched to her feet, finger jabbing the air at me. "I'll ruin you, Tom. I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes." I shrugged. "Good. I'll tell him how you blocked access to my livestock all day. Pretty sure state law doesn't like that much." She froze for half a second. Her eyes darted, looking for backup. No one stepped forward. I patted the hood of my John Deere. The green paint was clean except for a smear of silver on the bucket. The Bentley, once her shining symbol of status, now looked no more threatening than a busted wheelbarrow. The balance had shifted. Karen wasn't untouchable anymore. She was just another neighbor who'd pushed too far and paid for it. That's when Deputy Miller's cruiser rolled up. He stepped out, took one long look at the wreck, and his mouth fell open. Then he caught himself and tried to school his face back to neutral. "Evenin', Tom," he said slowly. "You want to tell me what happened here?" I spread my hands. Car was blocking my barn. I asked her to move it. She refused. My tractor needed out. The rest is pretty easy to follow. He glanced at Karen, wailing into her phone, then at the mangled Bentley, then back at me. A little smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth before he wiped it away. Well, he said, this'll make an interesting report. He wasn't itching to slap cuffs on me. He was here to witness the story everyone in town would be talking about by morning. And that suited me just fine. That night, with my cattle fed and hay stacked, I slid the barn doors shut and felt lighter than I had in years. For once, Karen's cackle wasn't echoing in my head. Instead, I heard the crunch of Bentley metal under tractor tires. Sweetest sound I'd heard in a long time. The wreck still hissed and smoked as Miller walked slow circles around it, jotting notes. Neighbors hung back but refused to leave, like a jury that didn't want to miss the verdict. Karen's voice cut across the yard. Arrest him. I demand you arrest him. That's destruction of property. Criminal damage. He should be in handcuffs right now. Miller held up a hand. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I've got to get statements from both of you. Statements? She screeched. What's there to say? Look at it. My car is ruined. She pointed at the wreck, nails flashing in the fading light. I stepped up, kept my tone even. Deputy, I asked her multiple times to move her car. It was parked directly in front of my barn all day. I couldn't feed my livestock, couldn't move hay. She refused to move it. That is not true, Karen snapped. I told you it was temporary. You could have waited. Livestock don't wait, I said. And the law doesn't either. You know that one, don't you, Miller? His mouth twitched again. Most people in this county know about the Agricultural Protection Act. Old state law meant to keep folks from messing with active farms during feeding and harvest. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my back pocket, edges worn from being handled. Here's the statute, straight from the county extension office. Blocking access to livestock facilities is a violation. Doesn't matter if it's a wheelbarrow or a Bentley. Karen froze. That can't apply here. This is a residential neighborhood. Miller cleared his throat. Technically, ma'am, Mr. Harris's land is still zoned agricultural. He's grandfathered in, which means the statute does apply. A buzz rose from the fence line. A few quiet chuckles. Someone whispered, serves her right. Karen's face went pale. No, this isn't happening, she muttered. Then louder. This is an abuse of power. He's twisting the law. I let her rant, then added, you know, Karen, there's another little detail. I'm not just a farmer. I sit on the county farm bureau, and our lawyers love cases like this. So if you want to drag this to court, I'm happy to go the distance. Her jaw dropped. For once, the queen of the HOA understood she wasn't the only one who knew how to play with paperwork. Miller snapped his notebook shut. Here's how this is going to go, he said. Karen, I'm citing you for unlawful obstruction of agricultural operations. You'll get a fine. If it happens again, penalties go up. He turned to me. Tom, you'll need to file an insurance claim for the car damages. But given the circumstances and the agricultural statute, I don't see grounds for criminal charges. The crowd broke into a mix of gasps and cheers. A fine? Karen howled. You're fining me? I'm the victim. Miller wrote out the citation and handed it to her. The law doesn't see it that way, ma'am. She crumpled the paper, staring around wild-eyed. This community won't stand for this. The entire board will be on my side. She spun toward the neighbors, waiting for the usual nods of support. Instead, she found crossed arms, narrowed eyes. A woman near the front called out, You fined my son for riding his dirt bike in our own yard, Karen. An older man added, You tried to ban our flagpole because it didn't match your color scheme. Another voice, You've been bullying folks for years. Looks like karma finally showed up, with 4 wheels and a front loader. Karen's gaze darted from face to face. Nobody stepped in to rescue her. The hive had turned on its queen. I just stood there, quiet, watching the empire crumble. For years, she'd ruled with fear and fines. But that night, the law, the neighbors, and a green tractor had finally pushed back. She stomped to the wrecked Bentley and kicked the twisted bumper. "You'll regret this, Tom," she spat, though her voice shook. "I swear you will." I tipped my hat. "Maybe. But my cattle got fed." The crowd broke into easy laughter, the kind that comes when a long-held tension finally snaps. Phones slid back into pockets. People drifted toward their driveways. The sky softened toward dusk. Miller gave me a nod as he headed for his cruiser. "Take care, Tom. I'll file the report. But between you and me, I think this neighborhood just saw more justice than a courtroom could manage." When his taillights disappeared, the last light of the day turned the wreckage gold. Karen slumped on the curb beside it, a fallen monarch next to the ruins of her throne. I went back to my porch, poured a glass of sweet tea, and let out a breath I'd been holding for years. I knew it wasn't the end. People like Karen don't just disappear. They stew. They plan. But I wasn't who I'd been when this started either. If she came at me again, I had more than a tractor. I had the law. I had my neighbors. And I had a lifetime of stubbornness she would never bulldoze. For that night, the quiet was victory enough. The night after the Bentley massacre was the calmest this place had felt in a long time. Crickets chirped. Cattle settled with full bellies. The barn door stood open, clear and free, as it was meant to be. I rocked on the porch in the chair my grandfather built, watching stars prick the sky. The tractor sat in its shed, a faint gleam of green under the moonlight. The little streak of Bentley paint on the bucket caught the light like a medal. Most folks would have called it a blemish. To me, it was a badge. By morning, the story had spread beyond the subdivision. At the feed store, boys slapped me on the back. "So, Tom," they'd grin. "How's that Bentley holding up under the John Deere?" I'd sip my coffee and let them imagine the rest. Not everyone was laughing, though. Within a few days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting to address recent events. Karen showed up pale and drawn, clutching her citation like it was proof of a grand conspiracy. She demanded I be kicked out of the community, that I pay damages, threatened to sick her lawyers on everyone. But whatever grip she'd had was gone. Neighbors who used to tiptoe around her finally spoke. A young mother stood and talked about how Karen had fined her son for riding his dirt bike on their own property. An older couple described how she tried to force them to remove their flagpole because it clashed with the aesthetic palette. Story after story dropped like dominoes. Years of petty cruelty laid out under fluorescent lights. By the end of it, the board took a vote. Karen was removed as HOA president. Just like that, her crown evaporated. She stormed out of the clubhouse, muttering about appeals and attorneys. But it was obvious. Her reign was over. I didn't throw a party. If I'm honest, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Power built on fear never lasts long. Once people stop being scared, the whole castle crumbles. Life on the farm slipped back into its rhythm. Cattle got fed. Hay got stacked. Tractors rolled without anyone threatening to write them up. The HOA still sent the odd note. Paint the fence, trim the hedge. But without Karen breathing down their necks, it all felt more like suggestions than threats. Eventually, they hauled the remains of the Bentley away. All that was left was a scarred patch of dirt in front of the barn. I never reseeded it. I liked that bare spot. A reminder of the day a symbol of arrogance met a machine built to work. Every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not because I flattened a car, but because of what it proved. Shiny toys and titles don't beat grit. Not out here. One evening, a young neighbor wandered up while I was tightening a few bolts on the tractor. "Mr. Harris?" he asked, a little shy. I've never seen anyone stand up to Karen like that. "How'd you do it?" I looked at the tractor, then at him. "Son, sometimes you fight with words, sometimes with laws." I patted the steel hood. "And sometimes with horsepower." He laughed, but the lesson stuck. I saw it in his eyes. Weeks rolled by, and the whole place felt lighter. Kids' laughter carried down the road. Neighbors waved without glancing over their shoulders first. The land itself seemed to breathe a little easier. I knew there'd be more challenges, droughts, storms, taxes, maybe another Karen someday. But I also knew this: my father was right. If you protect your way of life with honesty, grit, and the right tools, no one can bulldoze it out from under you. The barn door stayed clear. The cattle thrived. The tractor sat in the shed, gleaming and patient, ready for whatever came next. Because on this farm, that war had been won. If there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that standing your ground isn't about who yells the loudest or who's got the fattest wallet. It's about refusing to let anyone bully you away from what matters. Karen thought her Bentley and her HOA clipboard gave her real power. But real power doesn't come from cars or titles. It comes from roots, from resilience, from knowing who you are and what you'll protect. Life will always put people like Karen in your path, the kind who treat control like a birthright and intimidation like a hobby. You can't let their noise drown out your purpose. Whether it's your land, your job, or your family, you guard it with everything you've got. And if that means getting creative with the tools in your hands, so be it. For me, it was a tractor. For you, it might be something else. But the principle's the same. Don't let arrogance block your barn door. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a Karen who pushed you too far? What would you have done if someone blocked your barn, your driveway, or your freedom with a Bentley? Drop your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this tale of HOA nonsense and tractor-powered justice, hit that subscribe button, because there are plenty more stories where this one came from. Around here, the drama never sleeps.